Hey, we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome, Juan. Thanks for speaking to the Sound Architect today.
I'm excited to be here. Let's chat some VO. Let's chat some recording. I'm stoked.
Yeah, let's do
Put me
it.
on the
Let's do
spot. Ask me questions.
it.
I'm
Cool.
excited. I've been
So,
talking all day already. I've been doing tech stuff and voiceover stuff. Let's do this.
yeah, let's just keep going. Keep you talking. So, just for the benefit of the listeners, just go over a little bit of what you do.
I am a voiceover casting director in sunny Southern California. I do mostly commercial work. I've cast a few like smaller video game titles, a couple animation projects. And then I also do a lot of production work where I've been an on-set location mixer, I've been a sound supervisor, I've done work on TV pilots, short films, a couple features. You can actually see me on camera as the sound guy in a horror short, The ABCs of Death. I'm in Q is for Quack as Juan, the sound guy, which was a trip having to perform on camera as the sound guy while I was legitimately the sound guy for that short film. And then on the side, I'm also a tech blogger and a tech pundit, where you can catch me, some gadget guy, talking about phones, laptops, tablets, and then getting into some of the political and social issues regarding technology and how we use it today. So I'm all over the place. It's an exciting time right now for me. It's been great growth.
Definitely all over the internet right now, and you got your fingers in very many pies, keeping yourself nice and busy.
Well, it'd be definitely better than the alternative. Especially people in Hollywood can tell you when it gets slow, it gets scary. It's not fun.
So, how did your journey into audio begin? How did it start? Where did you begin?
Well, I mean, like, I think for a lot of people who want to work in voiceover, we kind of have an early fascination with things like animation.
Right.
I remember very, very young realizing that the voice of Optimus Prime was the same voice as Carr, the evil Trans Am in Knight Rider.
Yeah.
And you're like trying to express that as a little kid, and people would like, well, no, Optimus Prime is a good guy. He can't be the voice of Carr. And you're like, no, I swear it's the same voice. And then realizing that it wasn't a talking car, that this was legitimately something that you could do. You could be the voice of a car. You could be the voice of a transformer, or be the voice of a robot, and that was a person,
Yeah.
and they would do that, and that was their job. So of course, like I spent like years like, well, how do I do that? Because I want to do that. And so I kind of let it go, going through high school, and I started in college thinking, well, maybe I'll go into computer science, or maybe I'll pursue theater. I'd been a performer for most of my young life and young adult life, and somehow got my butt back into theater and dance. And it was during that, thinking that I was going to be a dancer, that I kind of rediscovered recording through trying to do sound design on a black box theater performance that I was doing. So I would go to my professor and say, hey, we want to do these sound effects. I want to try and make this tiny little black box theater sound like a bowling alley. And he would hand me a stack of CDs, and you're like, oh, well, you just pull a sound effect off of one of these CDs, and then you put it on a new CD, and we can run it through the board. And I'm holding it going, but all of these sound effects suck. I need to know, like, how do I make a better sound effect?
How do I make it awesome?
And so, a group of us went around with little like tape-based memo recorders, and we would like beg, borrow, and steal our way into like bowling alleys. And I got to go behind a bowling alley just to get the sound of pins getting smashed by the ball.
Nice.
And, like we like inadvertently had created a mini sound department, me and three friends. And it was our first experiences using like disc-based recording software. And so immediately after that, I went and interned at a radio station for a little while. It's where I cut my first voiceover performance in front of the microphone for the Southwest Tennis Company. Restring your racket, get a free can of balls. And then it just sort of snowballed from there. During my theater career, I got very tired or I got very bored with my own voice. I wanted to be the person who was responsible for putting interesting pairings together of different performers, and so I veered from performance into direction. And then that just sort of coincided with a technical background in recording, and I started cutting demos probably earlier than I should have, but I still think they're good demos. And so the wife and I were really looking. We were both theater students, and we both sort of had a background in performance and then stage. She's one of the best stage directors, my wife, that I ever had the opportunity to work with in college. And so we were looking at where to go. And New Mexico's a great town, but we needed to go where the work was. And so that took us to LA, where I jumped into Abrams Artists Agency, directing the talent there, starting with some of the best voiceover talent in the world at Abrams Artists. And then after a couple years there, I went out to the Voice Caster, which is one of the oldest voice casting facilities in LA, in Burbank. And now I still work with the Voice Caster. I still do a little freelance casting on the side, especially for industrial stuff that you'll probably never see. And that's kind of the circuitous route to how I got to where I am now.
Wow, so just a long, long process and just keeping going, basically.
Well, and like a lot of people, when you ask them about how they got into voiceover, there's no career path. You know, like if you want to be a lawyer, there's a pretty established route for how you're going to achieve that. For voiceover, the stories are as different as the people who you ask. You know, everyone has found their own path into this as a career, which is also what makes it such an exciting collaborative art.
Definitely.
Is you can learn a lot, because your path won't be the same, but you can still learn a lot from how someone got into this business.
Yeah, you can learn what not to do as well, can't you?
Well, actually, that's a lot of what you learn when you pay attention to other people's stories. You totally nailed that. That's funny.
But yeah, I mean, everyone's got a different story. But what I find is kind of constant is that you basically make the most of all the opportunities that present themselves. That's kind of one constant in the whole field. You kind of always say yes to the opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of when you get out of the notion of working a job and then building a career. You know, you're in high school, you're in college, and you're flipping burgers, or for me it was flipping pizzas. That's a job. You know, I wasn't going to not to besmirch some people that I knew at the pizzeria who really did want to work in management and then maybe take on some franchises. You know, that's their career. That's what they wanted to work. That wasn't going to be my career. And so, you know, you really look at, you know, what's really driving you. What do you wake up every morning needing to do, not wanting to do, but needing to do. And then you want to put yourself in situations where you can build on opportunities, where you can build relationships. And voiceover is one of those great niche performance venues, where once you get through the peripheral fog of people who claim voiceover but aren't really, you find a core group of working professionals who are very accepting and very open-armed about welcoming new members into the craft. Once you've sort of paid your dues, it's one of the most welcoming set of performers I've ever had the pleasure of working with.
Yeah, definitely. I found on my travels, so to speak, that the voice acting community is a very warm, very welcoming community. Everyone's happy to help each other. Even though it's a highly competitive field, there is a lot of people there to help you on your way.
Well, and it is, and I think there's a little less ego because no one ever gets to see your face.
Yeah.
So I think that's a small part of it, but it's about doing good work, and it's about finding interesting collaborative opportunities. And I think there's still a sense of that being first and foremost in the world of voiceover, where some of our on-camera endeavors can be a bit more cynical. I mean, not to say that this is always the case, but you get into those conversations of, well, I think so-and-so was cast for this project because they're really attractive. Maybe they're not the best performer for this role, but they'll put more butts in movie seats because blah, 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 blah. And you can't do that with VO. I mean, we've seen too many examples of when you cast someone for name recognition and then they don't turn out the performance that we really wanted them to. And I think movie studios are getting a bit savvier about mixing in people with a fan base, people who are genuinely good actors and performers, who then also might carry some sort of credit or name recognition too. So it's been slow going because we've had a lot of travesties along the way. But I think the entire outlook is looking a bit better for how we put projects together and who we put on them.
I have a question that relates to that, actually. It's interesting you state that with VO, people aren't usually picked for their looks because of obviously they're picked for their voice. But with things in video games like motion capture, where people are acting out the scenes now and people are almost doing the acting side as well, do you think that's going to change because people are going to starting to be fitter for some scenes And also they're doing facial motion capture as well. So do you think that's going to have a bit to play?
Well, I mean, it's definitely going to change. I mean, the technology that we've used for motion capture, every new title that comes out using some aspect of motion capture uses a radically different technology than the title that preceded it. That's a constant state. I mean, I almost kind of feel bad for those people who are investing or running their own studios, because what a game publisher wants to use on one title is going to be very different than what they want to use on the next title, and that infrastructure and investment is profound. The amount of camera tech and recording tech that you need to install into a space just to stay competitive, and then to rip it all out after a title to upgrade as quickly as technology changes is significant. What I kind of hope to see is a return to, because of my background, the voiceover performers that I get along with the best are theater trained. I just have an easier time communicating intention, character, context, scene, relationship with people that have that kind of background. And what I love about motion capture and performance capture is we sort of return to that. You need to carry a force of imagination to convince someone that you really are where your character is supposed to be when you're on a bare black soundstage with little balls stuck to your costume. You know, like it's a crazy way to work. So
yeah, put someone in a leotard and say you're in a thunderstorm, go for it.
so in terms of will it change, it absolutely will change. But what I hope to see evolve is, again, is sort of refocusing on combining the performance capture with the motion capture. It seems a little awkward those times where you've seen games that employ sort of body actors that aren't the same as the voice actors. There's still just that little bit of a disconnect, that something's just not quite right with that performance, especially when we've seen, like Andy Serkis on playing Gollum. There's no way you could have done that kind. You captured that kind of a performance with a completely artificial digital character if there wasn't tremendous synergy between the body and the face and the emotion and all of those pieces working together. So I hope I think the video game industry is working towards that. When we see avatar tech from years ago now starting to show up in how we produce games, it's just a matter of getting them on board because you have to talk about the art and commerce side of it, is getting them on board that kind of investment, or working with studios who have made that kind of investment to make sure that that the games get to benefit from those kinds of performances.
Yeah. So you say you got sick of your voice and you wanted to kind of, just be on the other side.
I know, which is funny considering I talk a lot.
But do you still do kind of, guest appearances, or do you still fancy a bit of VO?
I try not to put myself on projects very often. I feel it's kind of a conflict of interest if I'm casting something. I just don't think that's kosher. I do probably 2 or 3 voiceover performance gigs a year, which is pretty good considering I don't audition. My booking to audition rate is pretty great. But for most of it, it's stuff that you'll probably never hear. I've done a ton of industrial work. I've developed a reputation for being a cool, geeky sound, and so I work with a couple post-production facilities where, hey, we just need to slap this on, an industrial rate video spot. Can you just knock out a paragraph? And I'm like, sure. And then they give me money for it, and everyone's happy. So, it always kind of irks me when people sort of have an inside track on what a project might be like, and they sort of use that for themselves. I don't really feel that that's what the relationship should be. And it's also not what I came out to LA to do. A great respect, tremendous respect to all the voice actors, especially out here in LA, that are driving around in traffic and then trying to get to their agencies to use those studios, and then also have to invest in their own home studios just to be a full-time auditioning actor. That is not for me. That is not my jam. So I try and keep those worlds as separate as I can.
So from your point of view then, what has been your most challenging project so far? Or what challenging incident, maybe, without naming projects?
You know what? I can't say that there's a most challenging. It's when you get a good challenge, it's exciting because it gets the brain juices pumping, and who do I want to put on this, and who do I think can really nail this, and that's actually really exciting. That's when my job is fun. It's I would say it's been over the last 5 years where I've noticed a marked shift in how producers go about voiceover. Timetables have gotten even more extreme. The casting process has gotten even more abbreviated. The production process is coming in last minute all the time. Budgets are always maxed out. We're always trying to get more for cheaper. And it's not. It's kind of disappointing. It's an aspect of this business that I think is hitting the post-production facilities the hardest, because they're sort of having to put money on projects that they're not getting paid for, and then they're not getting invoiced in a timely fashion. So it's always sort of a stressful endeavor when you kind of walk into a situation where most of the commercial shot, it's got to deliver in 48 hours. We need to put a voice on this. We went to Voice Bank and we got 900 choices. We don't know who to cast. We literally do not have time to listen to all of these auditions. Now we have to pay someone else just to come in and sort of sort out this mess for us. And so that just looks like another expense as opposed to a part of the project that they were building and billing for. And so that's not a fun way to work. Thankfully, you can build up relationships so that you can sort of head off some of those concerns. But the realities of commercial production are just, it's so aggressive now that just the industry itself is challenging for the people trying to produce this content, let alone for the delicate balance of risk to reward. And oh, hey, welcome back. We're answering we're answering Jay Preston's question from Twitter, and Jay Preston asks, "I'd like to know what makes an audition really stand out." And so one of the things that sucks about this process is producers often really don't know what they want. They're very good at telling you what they don't want to hear, but they're not very good at telling you what they do want to hear. Now, this can work to your advantage because they don't know what they want. If they knew what they wanted, you wouldn't have the audition in the first place. They'd just go get what they wanted. So really, it's not about trying to play the game from some aspect of what makes an audition stick out. It's what can I do to really execute an idea that showcases what I bring to the table. Because essentially, what you need to do with your audition is walk up to a producer and say, you need to hire me. I'm going to solve your problem. And we need to hear a clear identity, a clear personality, and a clear idea being executed to 100%. We need to hear that confidence. If we don't hear that, we're going to move on. And one of the things that sucks is often when you're jumping into your audition, you're going to read through the copy, and then you're going to hit the direction down at the bottom of the page, and it's going to be a bunch of wishy-washy, halfway intentions from people that are sort of middle management at an ad agency, but don't really want to be the face of a failure if the commercial underperforms. So you get, I mean, if you've done any VO at all, you're very familiar with we want someone cool but not too cool. We want someone smart but not too smart. We want something this but not to this, and we want something that but not to that, which means you're already thinking about a halfway intention before you've even performed the copy. You're thinking, well, how can I do 60% of an idea? Which means most of the auditions I'm going to hear are going to be generic, safe, weak, flat, dull, boring auditions. What I need you to do is actually take that copy and not like you do something interesting with it, but I need you to find something honest in it, or I need you to find where you fit into it, or I need you to answer a question for me, or I need you to solve a problem for me. I mean, it's kind of hard. I mean, like with an individual piece of copy, I can point out, all of the script analysis that you'd need to do, but that's why you hire me for coaching.
Last plug there.
Yeah, anytime. It's how we keep the lights on. But it's really about making smart decisions, analyzing the copy, because all of those producers had to get that copy approved. Legal had to put their stamp of approval on the copy, but there is no agreement on the direction, and you can see it very clearly when a couple people are working on the voice of a spot, and that direction starts to get really contradictory, or there's a lot of conflict in it. So to instantly put yourself ahead of like the bottom 30% of any audition pack is coming up with that idea, coming up with that concept, executing it to your maximum. I mean, you want to play an intention full out. So you need to make a smart choice on what's an idea that I can play to its maximum, not, well, he's kind of a cool guy, but, you know, he's really laid back and he really wants to talk to his sister about Coca-Cola. You know what? That's the shittiest audition I'll ever hear. It's crap. You've delivered a crap audition. So congratulations, you wasted both our time.
Nice. Cool. Well, we have another question from Twitter from Marissa Lenti, who says, what do you think about new voiceovers inviting established professionals to copy for guidance? So it kind of relates to our old questions. So is it tacky or is it acceptable?
It's acceptable depending on how you go about it. Don't be a creeper. But these are people who genuinely, I mean, no, seriously, like professional voiceover actors are people who like to collaborate, and they like to meet people who are on the way up. Because you never know where your next job's going to come from. You never know where your next opportunity is going to blossom from. So don't be pushy or obnoxious, but, you know, making the and also, I mean, just be respectful of the fact that if you make the invitation and they turn you down, that's totally their prerogative. It's not them being a jerk. It's just literally, you know, maybe they don't want to coach or counsel or meet someone at that particular moment. But, you know, I don't see anything wrong at all with extending the invite, saying, hey, I'd love to pick your brain, or then also, I mean, they might turn around and do the same thing that I just did here too, where it's, you know, hey, I'd love to pick your brain, and they say, well, you know, that's part of my business, and maybe we can talk about some coaching. That has to be acceptable in that relationship as well. It's not them being a jerk. It's that, you know, you're talking to someone who's been performing, you know, since he was a Cub Scout, you know, and like, you know, campfire skits and stuff like that. So, you know, the part of what makes me valuable and part of what makes me money and provides me a living is a lifetime of established knowledge, which I can't always dedicate the time to giving out, even for a free lunch. It's a lot of us try to stay busy, which means, you know, not to be too cliche, but that time is money aspect can also play into you building a new relationship with someone as well. And that's kind of just how the game is played. But absolutely, I would say reach out, meet as many people as you can, try and hit up mixers, try and hit up you know, different events, functions, conventions. Meet the people that you envision, try to meet the people that you envision someday having a career with. And that's not a bad way to start a discussion of how you yourself might become a part of this industry.
Definitely. So when you're looking for new VOs, I mean, do you have an established list already, I take it?
See, this is one of the things, like, I don't scout newbies very often. Yeah. I got spoiled starting at Abrams Artists, who genuinely were probably in one of the top 5 at least voiceover agencies when I was working there. You know, when you jump in at that tier, it's very easy to sort of just assume that that's what voiceover is for everybody. And then moving over to the voice caster, you know, if I do a casting project and a client wants 30 options on what the voice might sound like, I'm usually good for 20. Just out of my own phone Rolodex, coming up with 20 people that I think might be appropriate for that audition. And then I can reach out to agents across the city to say, hey, you know, like, I'm looking to fill a slot. Do you have someone that I haven't heard? Do you have someone that you're trying to push? Do you have someone that you think might be appropriate or might be fun? So at no point during that process am I really trying to reach out to people that haven't been vetted in some way, either by myself or by an established talent agent in Los Angeles.
But obviously you oh, sorry, yeah, you're back now. There we go.
Sorry, I was worried I lost you again.
That's all right.
I'm
No,
so
no, I
afraid.
don't know what happened there. It just kind of went really quiet for no reason. So yeah, you obviously listen to demo reels, and because you coach, you obviously help people make demo reels, right? So what's your kind of top tips for demo reels?
Get to the point. Don't belabor an idea. You have to understand that just like with an audition, I'm probably not going to listen through the whole thing. So if your demo, I mean, if your demo is 90 seconds, you just have to have a good reason for why it's 90 seconds. I feel, especially for those people at the early stages of their career, there probably aren't many reasons to have a long demo. There just aren't. You're probably not that good. Um, and I don't mean that to sound as snarky as it did. I just realized that sounded really shitty of me. But you want to be able to showcase the things that make you desirable. You want to showcase, just like a small business, it's advertising. You want to be able to showcase the things that you do better than anyone else. So on your first demos, that's probably going to be a short list, especially when you realize that your demo is going to be going up against people that have been in this industry longer than you've been alive. Um, that's a heady game to play because you don't want to sell yourself short, but you've got to make really tactical and smart choices about what it is that you're trying to achieve, especially from that business perspective of getting a good return on your investment of spending studio time, spending money, spending exerting effort in crafting these marketing materials to put them in front of someone like me. It's kind of why I don't like doing demo coaching or demo critique, unless you're hiring me to really sit down, because I'm a casting director. When you put marketing materials in front of me, you should be putting your best foot forward. You should be trying to impress me. So putting an unfinished demo in front of me means that that's going to be my first impression of you as a marketable entity, and it's going to be something unfinished and not ready for prime time. You really want to ask yourself, is that time well spent? I'll tell you what I think is wrong with it, but that might clash with what your producer's working on, and it might not agree with what it is that you're trying to accomplish in marketing and advertising yourself. If it's really good to go, if it's really finished, that's when you send it to me, and then I can keep you in mind for future castings, or I can say, hey, have you considered putting this under someone else's nose, or who's your agent, or who are you working with to try and get your materials heard? It's why I kind of get a little standoffish about the demo question. I used to produce demos, and I used to do that a lot, but then once I started working at Abrams, that business tapered off because I really didn't want to have to make those decisions for other people. And there's a lot of grief involved. I mean, I don't think people really understand when you get a really good demo producer, they're not an engineer. They're crafting something that they want to put their mark on as well. And so then they get notes back from some voice talent where it's like, well, my mom thought that this spot should be first. And you're like, that's great. That's not something they envisioned for your marketing materials. And all too often, that relationship gets really strained and really stressful because there isn't agreement on what it is that they're trying to do. And I think in part because voice actors don't spend that kind of time prepping the business side of their career. And so they end up playing the same game that commercial producers play. We don't know what we want, but we know what we don't want. You're like, well, that's no way to go about trying to do something like your first or second or third demo. It's like you really want to know what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and then you'll get much better results from it.
Definitely, and going back to what you say, it's quite daunting because to remember that you are, as soon as you start submitting a demo and getting into that pool, you're in the ocean with all the big guns. You're up against everyone. There's no kind of amateur level stuff that, once you're into that big wide world.
Yeah, it's the great loss of this technological terror that we've created. I mean, I'm a gadget blogger. I'm a futurist. I bring on the next phase of human evolution as augmented by our technology. I'm ready. But the thing that we've lost is when you go back and read books that were written about voiceover from, even a decade ago or 2 decades ago, we've completely lost that sense of apprenticeship. And it hasn't been replaced by anything that I feel is half as valuable. And so we're doing something amazing right now. I mean, you're in the UK, I'm in Los Angeles, and we're having a conversation over the internet to talk about voiceover and recording, but that still doesn't beat the years that people would spend in recording studios learning from masters of their craft, both in front of mixing consoles and in front of the microphones, to really establish themselves as a well-honed performer, talent, and technical artist. We don't have that anymore. Now it's this rush to buy a nice mic and lock myself up in my closet, and I really feel this is going to insult a lot of people, and I do apologize ahead of time, but I really feel that we're crafting a generation of people who are horrible performers but are really good editors. And when I get some newbies in the booth who have fantastic materials and craft great auditions, but they can't act their way out of a paper bag in the moment, that does not speak well to the future of our craft or the future of our industry. And especially coming from someone who really values that theatrical experience, the improv experience, black box, I have no budget, I need to imagine my way out of this problem to take the audience on a journey. That makes me sad. It's not where I want to see this industry go. It's really why I feel like when you look at like the video game industry, when you get into AAA titles, it's a very small cast list of people that work on a lot of games, and I feel it's because they bring those tools to the table in a way that the larger periphery of wannabe voice actors haven't figured out. It's about the acting.
Yeah, definitely. With demos, as we were saying, like people can practice over and over and over again until they do it right. Whereas you have to remember, you have to be able to do that for hours on end. You can't just go, right, I've had 1,000 takes to do it perfect for my demo. I'll send that off, and then people will expect you to be able to do that constantly. You can't just do like high-pitched voice that you can do for 10 minutes, and then expect people to be like,
and it also goes hand in hand with the new sort of generation of producers that we're training, who their first experiences are probably going to be with voice talent that need to be line read, that they don't bring those tools to the table. And so then they have sort of a skewed perspective on what more established voice talent can do. And especially out here in LA, I mean, you talk to established work-a-day, they're auditioning every day and working jobs on a regular basis, voice talent. They all have stories of walking into the booth, laying down a couple takes on something, and then seeing wide-eyed, shocked expressions from engineers and from producers, is because they're not used to working with that caliber of talent. And I'm telling you guys, like, a good VO performer is going to solve your problems for you. He's not going to create more problems for you. And a good VO is going to save you an assload of studio time. If you're talking a 30-second commercial and they can knock it out in a couple takes and give you something that's fit for air, you don't need to spend a 4-hour session coaxing a tagline out of someone.
Yeah, they've already booked it going, oh, what do we do the rest of the time now?
Yeah, hey, let's break for lunch. This is great. We can take a long lunch. I love this. That's really what you're looking for is a good problem solver. And I've been very, very lucky, and I've been very thankful to work with people that are really good at solving problems throughout most of my career.
You've worked with some amazing, amazing talent, and it purely is talent. You must have some fantastic stories. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind of just one of the most amazing stories you've had so far?
Well, because I've been on other shows and stuff, and I've talked about some of my various experiences. One of my all-time favorites was just doing an audition with Zooey Deschanel. She was in the running for Coca-Cola. I think Holly Hunter actually got the spot, but we spent probably 40 minutes in the booth just working on that, and I would say about half that time was basically just spent in a conversation talking about how awesome it would be to have pet robots. Right? Because she was just so genuine, and it was so apparent that she was bringing a very unique perspective and a very playful attitude to this. Not because the copy called for it, so she was going to act playful and quirky. It's just that she didn't know how to be a voice actress other than this is what I do for my performance. And it was just so real, and it was so present, and it was so in that moment that it was one of my all-time best working experiences. And it wasn't even for the project; it was just for the audition. I was at the talent agency at the time. So experiences like that, just track very, very high. But you have a lot of those experiences when you work with these workaday voice actors, the booking commercial actors, because they also bring a sense of that temperament, that personality to the table every single time they walk into an audition situation. There's a gentleman by the name of Peter Jessup that I would highly recommend people check out. He's on dozens of commercials. You've heard his voice, if you're in the United States, I should say. You've heard his voice tons of times. And I think he's also going to be in an upcoming Justice League straight-to-DVD animated feature. He was the voice of Vision, I think, in one of the Avengers stories. But just a phenomenal performer, and you get in the booth with him, and his cold read is going to be better than most people's prepared reads, because he's just been consuming language for so long that there's a music to it that he just understands, and he just brings it. The same thing with Clancy Brown, my all-time favorite Lex Luthor performer. I got to do a read for, it was a camping gear commercial, and someone else had given him the copy and was getting him prepped up, and I walked into the booth, and he was like, okay, well, let's jump in. And I was like, oh, great. So he's all prepared. And so he sets the copy down, delivers a read. I think it's amazing. And I click in, and he was like, okay, so that was okay for a cold read. Why don't we go ahead and record one for real now? And I'm just like floored that I'd been listening to campsite commercial auditions for 2 days, and Clancy Brown walked in completely unprepared and blew them all away. And again, it was just, this is a performer who knows exactly what he brings to the table. He knows exactly why we called him to be a part of this, and he just has a relationship with language and performance that has been honed for the better part of 3-4 decades of being in this industry. And that's mastercraft. That's amazing. And so whenever you get to experience something like that, whenever you get to work with something like that, it completely changes your perception on what this industry should be about and what it could be about.
It's just been so amazing for you so far then, by the sounds of it, and you've done so much. I mean, do you have a kind of dream project you want to work towards? Or is there something, I mean, obviously you look forward to all the new technology and everything, but is there a project that you're still looking forward to?
I'm still mulling over, kind of what I want to do when I grow up.
Will that actually happen though? Will you grow up?
It's really a remarkable thing to reflect on, because we still have challenges and we still have problems, and I still have pissy producers, and you have bad days. You have a lot of bad days, but your worst day possible working in this industry is so much better than anything else that I've had to do to make a living. I've worked in tech sales, and I used to work on a JIT contract for Department of Energy, where I got to work on server installs for particle accelerators. Actually, no, it was mostly environmental science, so it wasn't even that sexy. But even though I had amazing experiences working in that industry, it just nothing really compares to having that one good day in VO where everything just locks into place and everything sort of makes sense, and your performers are just bringing amazing work to the table, and your producers are appreciative of, they understand that you just helped them, even though that's what they paid you to do. It really is the best job on the planet, and it's a wonderful experience when all of that stuff falls into place. And so you just sort of crave it, just like you crave a good audience response on stage. You sort of crave that, all of the planets in alignment moment when you're putting together voices
Yeah.
on a project, and it doesn't happen as often as you'd like it to, but God, you want it.
Yeah, I'm good for it.
It's great. I mean, it really is fantastic. So where I go next? I mean, I don't know. It's exciting because there's so much opportunity to explore in putting together other productions and putting together other opportunities. Unfortunately, I don't think that the commercial casting game is going to exist in a way that supports me long term. I think internet casting, web casting, we're already seeing it with on-camera casting, where it's just too easy to put more of the burden on the performer, which I think is sad. I don't want my actors being good techs. That sounds kind of cheesy, but I want them to be good performers. I don't want them to be good tech support, and I don't want them to be good DPs, and I don't want them to be good audio engineers. I want them to know their role in this process so well that I can count on them to be of singular focus when it's their time to perform. It's a little troubling because there's all of this stuff is evolving at a rate that's way faster than our industry's ability to adapt to it. So, I don't know what the next stage of SomeAudioGuy evolution looks like. But it'll probably involve telling people how they do stuff wrong. So as long as I get that, as long as I get to continue doing that, then I guess I think I'll still be happy with this industry.
So how did we'll start with SomeAudioGuy first. How did that come about? What made you decide that, I've got so much to say about this, why don't I just put it online and tell the world?
SomeAudioGuy is a part of my personality which exists solely to make the rest of my life easier. I was getting so many questions working at Abrams Artists about home recording setups and how do I buy a mic and what kind of mic should I buy and how should I submit auditions. And I was having the same conversation with people face to face over and over and over and over again. And it really did make my job boring. It made my job more difficult. So we weren't really allowed at that time. Now, every industry is really into social networking and media, and they kind of want to have that presence out there in the internet. They want to control that, but they still want to have it out there. And at the time, it was sort of frowned upon if we were too vocal about what it is that we were doing. There was a lot of fear we would accidentally leak, sensitive information, or who's going to be working on what projects, or even just, we got an audition that someone else didn't get. We want to keep that privileged. Because it's an opportunity for our actors that we don't want more competition on. So SomeAudioGuy was my pseudonym, so that I could start sort of sneaking some of this information out in a way that wouldn't get me fired at Abrams Artists.
Untraceable.
Well, and it wasn't long, because I was at Abrams Artists for 2 years, and it was a couple months before I left Abrams Artists where I was outed, and then I started doing more interviews and stuff like that. But it was very cloak and dagger for a while there to get SomeAudioGuy out. But SomeAudioGuy now, because he's primarily a Twitter personality more than he is a blogging entity. I don't update my SomeAudioGuy blog as often.
Do you love how he's third person now as well?
Well, but he is, because he's not me. He's a piece of me, and he
He's
exists
like your Batman.
to make. Totally is. Because I am Bruce Wayne, only without billions of dollars and the dead parents. So I'm actually kind of appreciative of I'd take my parents over $1 billion. No, it's because he exists solely to make my life in the booth easier. He's where I can send some of my bitterness and some of my vitriol, and hopefully people can be amused by some of those insights and some of those what not to do. We said at the beginning of this, a lot of this voiceover is learning about what not to do, and that I can share through him some of those experiences without having to name names or without having to shame someone. And he's really good at a rant. He's really good for me to sort of exercise that sourness that can build. Even in the career that I love, it can still build up. If there's some frustration and I need to exercise it, I can always count on him to be my alter ego to help get some of it out there. But he's also great for me to share what I think about advertising, or what I think about commerce, or what I think, especially social policy, and he sort of helped inform where I would go with technology. So I kind of have to talk about him as if he's not me, because that's how he was born. He was born so that he wouldn't be Juan Carlos Bagnell on the internet. He was born so that Juan Carlos Bagnell could hide behind him and say mean things about people.
So now you've got quite a following, though. People obviously know who SomeAudioGuy is, so you obviously have a little bit less freedom with how much you can let slip. If people come into the booth and read on Twitter that you've just been in the booth with someone who's completely lame, then they're going to know that you just spoke about them, aren't they? So.
Well, no, see, but that's just it. Is that one I do go to great lengths to talk about experience. My experience in the booth was this. I feel someone missed an opportunity because of that. And I'm very careful to not do well, so-and-so just came in on this audition and fucked up this line. The second they left the booth, it's not about shaming as much as it is about sharing. It's a little bit for me to express this was a frustrating experience, and so that will hopefully hit other people on their Twitter feeds, so that when they're in a similar situation, they have some information on, how to conduct themselves, because we don't get to share that information anymore. We don't get to observe, we don't get to learn, we don't get to apprentice. And so we have to go about this by trial and error, which is a horrible way to learn how to conduct yourself, how to conduct your business, and how to conduct your livelihood, of how to work on your career. Is just, well, I walked into a situation and I totally borked it. I guess I won't do that again, but chances are I'll probably never have the opportunity to do that again.
Yeah, exactly.
So, for as shitty as some audio guy can be about some of those things, I really do try to not link it in real time. And there have been a number of times too where I've even waited a day to say, like, oh man, this happened in the booth, and I thought this was a horrible way to do this, or this was a really confusing thing that someone just brought up, or someone's asking way too many questions. It's never a one-to-one relationship. It's never like, oh my god, this just happened, I've got to run to Twitter, because also I've got other things on my mind at that moment, especially if it's been a frustrating experience of like, well, do I send this audition? Do I fix this audition for them? What am I going to do? So Twitter's the farthest thing from my mind in that moment. But if you screw up bad in my booth, chances are it's going to make it some point in time.
Maybe not straight away.
It won't be straight away. It'll happen. It'll be up there.
So have you ever had any...
Oh, go ahead.
No, go on. I was going to say, have any awkward moments where people have kind of come up to you and gone, oh, I saw this on Twitter the other day. Was that about our session, or was that something else?
No, thankfully, I think the people that follow me, that I work with on a regular basis, know enough about their own audition process that they would be able to see if it was something they did. There are a lot of jokes of people I know in AFK coming into my booth and be like, oh great, you're going to tweet about this, aren't you? And we can kind of laugh about that, and especially there's just that knowledge that that they might actually screw up. We're human beings first and foremost. So this notion that even a high functioning, delivering, awesome, top of their game voiceover actor is never going to have a bad day is just a complete misnomer. They make mistakes and they screw up too. It's just it's just a very different conversation when they make a mistake, because they're also way better at recovering just because they've had so much more experience, that it's unlikely I'm going to run off and tweet about that experience as much as, especially it comes from the people sort of in that first third of their career. Not totally green. They've had some experience. They've probably booked a job or two. They're going out more regularly. Their agent's actually giving them a push. And that's where we start seeing, because they're encountering more people and they're going out on more auditions, where that greenness shows through a bit more, when they're a little less prepared to deal with criticism, or they're a little less prepared to deal with direction, or they just make like a dumb mistake. Like their agency they're used to handling the microphone, so they walk into someone else's studio and start jacking around with the mic just because that's what they're familiar with. And it's that familiarity which sort of breeds contempt. It's a misstep. It's almost never out of malice, which is what I think is interesting. But there's still the opportunity to make your career more difficult by falling into some of those traps. And if I can save some people some of that hassle or some of those headaches, then I think SomeAudioGuy does sort of a public service, and it also makes my job easier. The thing that is kind of a bummer is when people know me from Twitter first and then get the opportunity to work with me, and they think I'm going to be some ranting monster of an individual, and
just too afraid to step into the booth.
Occasionally, I did a coming back from CES. I was sick as a dog, and so I feel bad, but I still did a sort of a voice actor workshop. Actually, Jay Preston, who asked our first question, participated in that workshop, one-day workshop. And a couple people from that workshop, when they found out I was SomeAudioGuy, were very hesitant. And you could see like there was suddenly like a nervousness that wasn't there when I was just Juan. It was oh, he's that guy, and then I think it colored their performances, because like oh man, I'm thinking about all these things I shouldn't do, which isn't really what I'm trying to accomplish with SomeAudioGuy, but I can totally appreciate how that might happen. I'm a lot easier going, and I'm a lot easier to work with than I think my Twitter persona might showcase. So.
Yeah, I can just imagine when you were saying that you have a little laugh in the studio when they go, "Oh, so you're going to tweet about that?" and you're going, "Ha ha ha, yeah, I am."
Yeah, actually, I will. How about you don't mess up next time? How about that?
If you weren't such a failure, maybe I wouldn't tell everyone.
What's adorable is that
it's not that bad.
It's just how British that was too. It was like.
Because that's how we all speak, obviously.
Exactly.
And very posh, and we just say what, quite a lot.
Very posh.
Oh, very much.
I'm about to break out. I'm about to break out into like bad Eddie Izzard, impersonations. What on earth is that?
That was pretty damn good.
Oh, thanks. Dressed to Kill is amazing. I freaking love that special.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. But I get sidetracked a bit. But so SomeAudioGuy is basically fighting, not crime, but bad audio everywhere for the sake of everyone.
Yeah, for the sake of humanity, SomeAudioGuy exists as the hero voiceover needs. Not the hero voiceover deserves. But the hero that voiceover needs
right now. Because he can be the symbol.
You can tear him down. You can beat him up. You can take it.
Then, in that instance, then we move on to the other alter ego, SomeGadgetGuy.
Oh God, yeah.
So, he's not the villain now, is he? He's
You know what? I mean, the nice thing about the Some guys is that they both scratch an itch for me in that I like to get ranty. And so SomeGadgetGuy becomes a bit more big picture when it comes to technology, especially technology and politics. And I've ranted a lot about things like net neutrality. Distracted driving is becoming one of my biggest campaigns and my biggest causes. And I just find that the behavior we engage with while utilizing data services while we're also trying to operate a motor vehicle is reprehensible. And I really don't feel that there's any excuse for the kinds and the number of accidents and incidents that we see because of our Pavlovian response to responding to tweets and to emails and to text messages and stuff like that. And I also feel that technology is kind of complicit in that behavior. And so I want our gadgets to be better. I want our cars to be smarter. I look at something like the Tesla, and it's a gorgeous automobile, and I'm really excited about an electric car that can go 300 miles on a charge and can compete with a Maserati in terms of 0 to 60. But I also find it unconscionable that the main control surface is a tablet built into the dashboard, which takes your eyes off the road. It's a completely smooth surface, completely featureless. You can't operate it by touch. You have to look at it. And I think that's a horrible design ethic, and that we're seeing more of that going into automobiles. We're seeing more of that. We're not seeing less of it. We're not seeing automobile manufacturers looking at improving the relationship between ergonomics and data. We're seeing them just copying what we already have, which is tablets and phones and putting in touchscreen interfaces. And that's not the right way to go about this. If I can't get a heads-up display, it's the year 2014, and I still need to take my eyes off the road for a fraction of a second just to see how fast I'm going. We should have solved this problem by now. And now we're trying to incorporate far more information, turn by turn, directions, whether or not you're going to feed text messages or Facebook updates or emails to the driver while they're trying to operate a motor vehicle at, well, in LA, it's never really more than 20 miles an hour if you ever get stuck on the 405. But you've got 2 tons of steel and glass just ready to kill people by sort of confusing the driver or distracting the driver. So, I mean, GadgetGuy gives me that same opportunity to rant. Maybe those rants become a little bit more soapboxy or political than SomeAudioGuy, but he still sort of fulfills the same purpose for me, where I don't have to put my name out there as someone who's perpetually angry about stuff. I can kind of hide behind GadgetGuy just a little bit more. But then he also gives me the opportunity to meet just a completely different group of people who are also very into because I think this next stage of human content and media is going to be about self-production, and so the voiceover community is already well ahead of the curve. I mean, they've been doing this far longer than a lot of other industries have, and they're so much better prepared for it. So that you start having conversations with like people who want to do work on YouTube or even established YouTubers, and you start talking to them about things, and you're like, they don't understand mics and cameras and audio gear and video production. So they get in front of a webcam and you can hear their computer fan and you can hear their neighbor's dog barking, and they want to produce a better show, but that's not how they got into the business. And so it's another opportunity to have a conversation about largely the same experience but from a completely different perspective.
Definitely. I mean, I agree with the opinion you had about the cars with the tablets, and they seem to have gone in that direction with a lot of stuff as well now. So I preferred it back in the days where I had kind of memory for where my fingers were on phones, on even keyboards. Now I prefer the old keyboards because I remember where everything is, and I think it's terrible to take that away. And phones especially, it's getting sort of backwards in a way. They're doing more, but they're kind of less easy. They're more difficult to use because you have to look at them all the time now to use them.
Right.
And the battery life's awful in a lot of them because they're doing so much more. So I find my phone's great, but then at the same time, I haven't got time to charge it every 3 hours,
Right.
Not always that important.
And that really does become the next conversation that we need to have in this industry, is how do we improve that experience? We're all, if you use a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop or a desktop, if you use any kind of computer whatsoever, which chances are pretty good if you're watching us, on the show right now, that you fall into one of those categories, you're already a cyborg. You are. Data is our sixth sense. If you take away someone's internet, they're going to get super cranky super fast. I mean, for as much as we love to talk about, well, I'm going to go unplug for a weekend, you unplug knowing you're going to be able to plug back in. We really rely on our sort of mobile, glowing, rectangular brains to help us make it through the day.
Definitely.
So now what we need to do is, this is kind of plateaued. It doesn't matter if it's got an Apple logo on it, if it's got a Google logo on it, if it's got a Microsoft logo on it. They all kind of achieve a very similar experience, and so now we need to talk about what comes next. We need to talk about how we can feed information to ourselves more organically. We need to talk about how these can become less of a distraction to our social experience, because they're pretty awful. I would highly recommend in a group of friends, if you guys aren't aware of a game called Stacking. It's a lot of fun if you prepare yourself for it. You take everyone's phones and you make sure they're on and that the alerts are still going. You stack them in a pile in the center of a table when you go out to eat. And if anyone reaches for their phone, they have to pick up the check.
That sounds like a great game.
I played it. I did it a lot at CES 3 years ago, and I got so many free meals.
Was it because you tied your hand to the table, though?
Well, and it's difficult because we're so used to responding to this stuff. But you start again. I think especially the tech bloggers are a little ahead of the curve at this point, where being able to ignore a phone alert is becoming one of the kindest social gestures that you can make, especially because now when you're in a group of friends, we're even conditioned to respond to other people's phones. So if your phone goes off, I'll stop speaking, even knowing that that's not my device, it's not my alert. But, oh, do you need to get that? Do you need to look at that? Is the virtual experience on your phone more important than the face-to-face interaction that you're having with me right now?
Yeah, and people accept that. You're right. Yeah, people just go, "Oh, I'll let you get that,"
right,
and then just sit there.
And oftentimes, I mean, it's not all the time. It could be something really mission critical, or it could be really important for work, or it could be, like someone's in the hospital. But oftentimes, it's like, someone making a poop joke on Twitter or something like that. It's very rare that the experience waiting for me virtually on my phone really does outweigh the face-to-face experience that I might be having someone, in a social situation. And so that's where I think, it's getting panned right now, and I don't think Google's doing a good job of explaining what it actually is. But why this next stage, we need to start incorporating information services in a way which doesn't block our natural senses. So Google Glass becomes a very exciting opportunity, I think, because it's an eyepiece that you can look through. and it's an eyepiece which requires you to be looking out away from yourself, not looking in at a screen. I'm really excited about bone conduction. I have a pair of bone conduction headphones, so it's these pads that rest in front of my ear and vibrate the soft tissue in my skull to transfer audio information directly into my brain. It doesn't block my ears. So when I'm out jogging, you don't need to have an audiophile music listening experience when I'm out working out. But I want to be able to hear if a car's about to turn me into street pizza. You know, it's not blocking my ability to hear, but it's still giving me the opportunity to take phone calls and listen to music. And that's where we really need to start examining what other opportunities we have to
giving our senses back.
To take our senses back, but then to also incorporate this new data sense into those senses. I mean, if a car manufacturer isn't going to give me a heads-up display in the year 2014 on a Toyota Corolla, then I'll find someone else who will. I'll find someone else who will serve my turn-by-turn directions up and out where I'm already looking, as opposed to making me look at a TomTom or a phone inside my car. I mean, really think about what you're doing, because we have binocular vision. So that means when you focus in, all of that blurs out.
Yeah, definitely.
And it might only need you might only need to look at your phone for a fraction of a second to see what's coming, but in that fraction of a second is when you could do some serious damage.
Yeah, that's when everyone else breaks.
It shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't need to sort of force the industry to do this, but it's kind of where we're at right now, and it's kind of, you know, until we can really start having more conversations like that with our manufacturers, with our smartphone providers, with our carriers, and sort of force their hand, we're not going to get those tools.
I agree. It's completely disappointing how sort of a backward approach they've taken to it, really. Just kind of, like you say, distracting everyone all the time.
Well, I think in part it was because, like, the smartphone evolved so rapidly. You know, we didn't expect the smartphone to be a consumer experience. You know, BlackBerries, Windows mobile phones, Palm Pilots, those were for businessmen. Those were for, you know, corporate individuals. You know, you didn't really need to have that if you were just sort of a general consumer, or if you were a student, or if you were a housewife. You know, that wasn't really for us. And then the iPhone came around and blew up that thinking that consumers wanted to be able to check their email on the go too, that, you know, students wanted to be able to surf the internet on the go also. And so the arms race for our phones happened fast, where they got incredibly powerful. I mean, really, what you have in your pocket right now, if you have a somewhat, within the last 2 years, smartphone, is extraordinary. It would have been a supercomputer a decade ago. So now what we need to do is now that hardware has gotten as powerful as it has, we need to have conversations about how to catch the services back up to that experience, so that we're not killing each other over checking our Facebook feed.
Yeah. Well, that's what it has caused. A lot of people have had a lot of problems with that, haven't they? Because people are getting run over, people are crashing, people are doing all of this stuff because they're just so desperate to check their phones. I mean, I haven't done anything like that, but I admit that I'm sometimes even ashamed at how often I need to check my phone, or how often it goes off, and I, on reaction, just instantly go for it. I never think, oh, I'll get it in a sec. I'm always like, oh, what's that? You know.
I mean, if you'll pardon the plug, because I've done a lot of work with the It Can Wait campaign, if you'll pardon the plug, I would highly recommend everyone go watch From 1 Second to the Next. Werner Herzog directed a 35-minute documentary, which you can watch for free. It's on YouTube in HD, and it's about chronicling the lives of 4 families who have been affected by distracted driving. And if you can sit through all 35 minutes of that and not be emotionally moved or not feel like something has to change, then you're a robot, and I want to meet you.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at the actual movie part, I'm laughing at the robot part.
I might need to disassemble you for the sake of humanity, is what I'm saying. So, no, but I would highly recommend From 1 Second to the Next. It's on YouTube. It's for free. You can also catch it on itcanwait.com. I think they've got it posted there too. It's really difficult because we're all sort of complicit. You know, for as much as I rail against this, there are times where I'm stuck in traffic on the 405 and an alert goes off, and it's the reaction. I'm not thinking about it. I just reach for the phone, or I try and look at my smartwatch before I stop myself and going, what the hell am I doing? You know, why would that be in any way, shape, or form necessary for me to interact with right now? So it's one of those things that's like, the conversation needs to happen at every stage, from the corporate side to the manufacturing side to the art and science design. Fashion industry can help us with this too. The fashion industry can come out and start making some of these ideas more popular, more accessible. And then we also just need to, as consumers ourselves, just sit down and just kind of have a little chat, internally. What is it that I really value? What is it that's really important to me? And what should I do about that? And if more people would have those conversations, I think we would probably see change much, much faster.
Definitely. People seem to have a fear of being unavailable. I don't know why, but there used to be reasons. People were traveling, people were doing this, but now everyone seems to fear the fact that someone won't be able to get hold of them. People fear that they won't be able to reply straight away. I don't know why.
I get it. We don't want to miss things. It sucks when you're the last to know about something. We value this information, and I'm not saying that we should separate ourselves from it. I'm not advocating unplugging. I want to plug in more. I want to plug in a way that it enhances my other senses and enhances my day-to-day activities. I just want this fed to me in a way that is easier to deal with when I'm out and about. When I get home and I can just sit in front of glowing rectangles, I've literally got 5 screens in front of me propped up right now, my little mission control center. Great. I'm not operating a motor vehicle right now. I'm not trying to cross the street at a crosswalk on foot right now. I'm not sitting, having dinner with my wife right now. So now is the appropriate time. Yeah, I know. Now would be the appropriate time to fully invest in glowing rectangles. There are plenty of times where I should not be investing in glowing rectangles, and that's why we need to have these difficult conversations with ourselves and with the industry that I hope to continue supporting, moving forward with new technologies.
Definitely. I mean, you mentioned it briefly, but I was going to ask you about your kind of usage of Google Glass as well, because you've obviously been kind of mentioning it a fair bit recently over the past few months about its development and what it can do. So,
I am not a Glass Explorer, but I've spent quite a lot of time hanging out with other Glass Explorers, and I've worn Google Glass for a couple days. It's absolutely a step in the right direction. I'm really excited about it. It makes you look like the biggest dork on the planet, and I get that that's a barrier for a lot of people, and we'll have to figure out how to make that more accessible. But it uses bone conduction for the audio, which I think is genius. So I get audio alerts fed to my brain, and it doesn't block my ear. And that translucent eyepiece feeds me at-a-glance notifications in a way that's far less distracting than having to use a phone or even a smartwatch. So it's really what we need to start looking at. It's the best possible first step into a completely new relationship with our information. And so obviously it will need to evolve from where it's at now. But it's kind of foolish, in my opinion, to make fun of something like that, because it's so beta. It's so completely raw and unfinished. It's exciting to see where it could go, and we need to sort of encourage that discussion, not make fun of it. It's just also kind of disappointing from a marketing and branding perspective that the way Google went about doing the Explorers program, I think, did a big disservice to what the technology actually represents, because not most of them, not all of them, but a number of people who were geeky enough and sort of invested into buying $1,500 face computer aren't necessarily the best people to use as ambassadors for the general public. And it's very clear why the term glass hole has sort of taken root in discussing Google Glass, is because it only takes one douchebag to ruin the discussion for a bunch of consumers who are afraid and have concerns over how this technology might be implemented and how it might be utilized. It only takes one jerk to completely turn off a huge segment of the population as to what we can achieve with it, and that's disappointing, especially for the number of people who are out there having really interesting conversations and are trying to educate the public as to what's happening when you use Google Glass, because those concerns usually evaporate once people see what this thing actually is and what it can actually do. The privacy concerns become topics that need to be addressed, but won't be addressed by technology. They'll be addressed by the same social conditioning that we went through when phones started putting cameras on them. Like, if you see someone go into a gym locker room holding their phone up, well, yeah, that guy's an idiot and that guy's a douchebag. We don't like that guy, and there's a lot of social pressure on that guy to change his behavior. And it's the same thing if you walk in with a face computer on. That's not appropriate. We would change that behavior. We wouldn't just, oh no, our privacy. You know, the society doesn't respond or react that way. And then also it's other things too, like, you know, someone might be taking video of me out in public. I mean, they might be taking video of you now. How would you know? But it's so much, you know, it's so much more, you know, stealthy because it's a face computer. You know, we don't stare at people. Even in the middle of this conversation, we're not even in the same room, and I'm sort of looking around my room. I kind of focus on the webcam. I look at your face when you're talking. We're all over the place. When you're wearing Google Glass and you're shooting video of someone, all of a sudden you go rock solid. You go like stabilizer mode, and that's very unnatural. It's very obvious that you're doing something. You know, like so we already have a language established in how we deal with weirdness. You know, Google Glass isn't really as profound a jump as people are trying to make it out to be, because that's a salacious headline, you know, like, oh, someone took locker room video with their Google Glass. Well, yeah, that person's a jerk. We don't like that person. We're gonna make that person's life way more difficult. But
yeah, it's not Google Glass's fault.
It's about building a new vernacular or building a new social etiquette, and we need to do that. We absolutely need to, but it's not necessarily the fault of the technology. And these conversations sort of make it sound like, well, we probably just shouldn't have this technology then. And I think that the benefits of having eye-level computing far outweigh the social risks. The transition period will be very strained, and it'll be very it'll take us a little while to develop that new etiquette. But we need to, you know, it's something we need to do, not whether or not we should. It's how do we go about doing it, and we can't as long as we're still sort of having a fake debate or a pretend debate on whether or not we should be doing this thing. That's just my feelings on it.
No, I agree. I mean, we tackled this sort of thing before. Privacy's been an issue for years when new technology comes out, so it's just about kind of bringing it into society. You know, like you say, the person using it is the douchebag, not the technology. So people have been douchebags with other pieces of technology for years, so right. It's not going to be any different.
And I think we also need to have other conversations too about things like, if you've seen the movie Her, I think Spike Jonze' vision of the future where audio becomes a primary way to access our information is beautiful, especially being some audio guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Where, you know, that kind of stuff is fed to you through your ear, and you're not sort of focused on a screen, or you're having to look at a screen. I think that's a wonderful opportunity, and it's something that we definitely need to explore, because Siri ain't getting the job done right now. Google Now is not really getting the job done right now, and we can certainly look at other systems which we've already vetted. You know, like when IBM Watson can spank Jeopardy contestants, that's what I want on my phone. That's you know, I want a Watson app. I don't want Siri. I want Watson. Watson's a badass. That guy's awesome. You know, if I could talk to Watson and get, you know, like, you know, updates on weather and turn by turn what, you know, sporting, you know, my favorite teams are doing in sports, you know, like, that's tremendous. And he's way better at sifting through contextual information to feed me information on like what's happening in my calendar, or when I'll need to leave for work, or, you know, like maybe it's time to call my mom, or, you know, like we already have something in place that he's being used in medical diagnosis. Why wouldn't that be on my phones and tablets? That's what I want. That's what I think is exciting.
Definitely. We've just had another question sent in for Twitter, by the way. I'll just jump back to it.
Oh, yeah.
From Jay Preston.
We're going to talk about like voiceover recording. We haven't even talked about like, you know.
No, we haven't even talked about half the stuff we were going to.
Put all that stuff back together.
So we'll go back to audio. He says, what is the best audio deadening material, and what is the best cost-effective material?
Oh, the best audio deadening material, that's a tricky question, because a lot of us don't have the resources or the opportunity to really build in density. You need density to deaden. You're talking about two different components when you're sound treating, is the ability for sound to leak into and out of a space, and the sound to bounce around inside a space. So you're dealing with reflection and absorption. Absorption, you need dense material. So in my opinion, it would probably be plated fiberglass insulation, like an Owens Corning 703 or 704. Someone who's smarter than I am will have to correct me on exactly what model number is better for audio installation. So if you have the opportunity to tear up your drywall and install new insulation, then that would be the best for audio deadening. Obviously, many of us can't do that if we're living in apartments or like I'm in a condo, but like HOA would probably not be too happy about me doing a bunch of construction work inside my home right now. So it's you start having other conversations too. Like you can tell, like when I'm doing gadget review videos and when I'm doing hangouts and stuff, I keep packing blankets on the wall. It kind of helps a little bit. You need to look at weather stripping if you can seal up around windows and doors. Just anything where air or water could leak through, sound can leak through as well. And then you need to start having conversations about shaping the sound of your room so that you can eliminate echo and reverb. And a lot of people just sort of start stacking foam all over the place, but that's really more of an art than a science, because too much foam is going to eliminate high frequency sound that you probably don't want to get rid of, especially for the human voice. And the fact that way too many voice talent work their mics way too close, way closer than they should, means that you're going to end up with really dull, muddy recordings because all of your high end is going to get sucked out by this preponderance of foam. You're probably in your closet, which is already a boxy environment, so you get that coffin sound going, and then you're working your mic too close because you probably have other issues with noise or with computer fans or with other distractions in your environment, so you're trying to overcome. And you probably aren't driving your mic as well as you should. So if you have a hot preamp, you don't have to run your interface as hot, and your interface is going to be causing less noise to show up in your recordings. So if you're plugging a mic directly into an interface and the interface is only capable of generating like 40 dB, then you have to turn it really hot and then work the mic closer to make up that extra gain. If you have a dedicated pre, which can give you a hot line, then you don't need to do that, and your recordings will actually be quieter because there's just not as much interface noise and preamp noise being generated by that chain as well. So it's a really multifaceted approach to what you need to be thinking of when you're talking about setting up a home studio, especially a home studio which you can count on for, actual production grade audio. Most people don't really need to be having this conversation when they're just talking about auditions, but if you start thinking about your entire environment, your entire recording chain, from the source you're recording to the room that you're recording in, all the way through to the microphone as well, then I think you're going to have much better experiences. But I think to start, I'm doing fine. Right to my left, oh my God, directly to my left, I have a locker full of hyper exotic microphones. And when I record in my home office, 9 times out of 10, I'm on an SM57, $100 stage mic. This is what they mic the president on for press conferences. It's hard to go wrong with a $100 handheld stage dynamic microphone when it's being properly driven by a decent pre and a good interface. And then I've got packing blankets up on the wall just to kind of help keep some of the echo at bay. And a truck will drive by our back alley here, and I'll have to stop recording just because I'm going to get too much of the rumble in there. And so we have the same, all of us, we all have those same problems. So how you adapt or how you solve them is kind of unique to what your room and what your neighborhood are kind of like.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, let's jump on to the audio side. I've been looking forward to this part myself. So let's talk about. Yeah, let's do it. So let's start with the basics. Start with vocal capture. So where would you begin?
Well, I wouldn't. I would actually start with what is it that you're trying to accomplish. You need to sit down. You're a small business owner. Your small business is you, the voiceover talent. You need to think about what is it that I'm trying to showcase, what elements of my voice am I trying to display, and then you need to think about how do I do that in the best, in the way that makes me sound the best with the fewest distractions. So you just need to sit down and think about that first. Then you need to set a budget. None of this, what's the cheapest way I can do this, or what's the least expensive USB mic. If you're always thinking in terms of the least, that's what you will end up with. You will end up with the least. You will end up with the lowest. You will end up with the worst. The worst passable sound that you can achieve. You need to set a budget. You're a small business owner. You need to think about what your return on that investment will be. You are investing in your business. And if you were to try and go get a bank loan for your business, would the bank approve you? How good is your plan? you need to consider those aspects, because otherwise this is just going to be a hobby that you dump a ton of money into, and 2 years later you're burnt out because you're not getting anywhere. So set a budget, and then you want to try and maximize your purchase. You want to try and buy as much as you can for that budget, not try and save as much money as you can by buying the least capable stuff or the least expensive stuff that you think will get the job done. And sometimes that means investing in a relationship with someone who runs a studio. Maybe you need to spend some time and some money just getting their professional opinion on things. You can't expect everyone to just always give you advice for free. Just because a bunch of people on the internet says a mic is good doesn't mean it's going to sound good on you, and doesn't mean it's going to sound good in your space. So welcome to the world of relationship building, because this is also going to be something that plays into huge the rest of your career. And sometimes it means you need to build relationships on the technical side, on the artistic side, on the production side, on the directorial side, on the representation side. It's all about relationships. It's all about who you know. It's all about who you can work with and collaborate with. And then from there, you can start talking about things like, what kind of microphone should I buy? What kind of interface should I buy? What kind of software should I use? What kind of computer should I be working on? All of that stuff comes after. You don't start with that stuff. If you start with just buying a nice mic, you're an idiot. Plain and simple. That's the dumbest way to go about trying to do this, because if you buy a nice mic, you're actually probably going to cause more problems for yourself than if you buy like a mid-range mic, but you've invested in an entire ecosystem that supports the style of recording that you're trying to achieve or trying to attain. I can, if you can't make yourself sound good on like an SM58 or an SM57, you have no business calling yourself an engineer. You have no business trying to say that you work in recording. We understand these mics, and these mics have been around, or I mean, at least from the SM56. I have a vintage SM56 in my locker too, which is the mic that came out before this one. It came out after the SH55, the one that we all know of with Elvis Presley. It's kind of the silver skull-shaped mic. Since the late 60s. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. You can make better or worse choices than that, but it's also kind of why we all get hyped up about like the U87. It's a $3,000 mic. Few people in the right studio are going to not sound good on a U87. But you go and put a U87 into your closet, you're a moron. That's ridiculous. That's the stupidest way to go about building your business and building your reputation and building your technical skills and moving forward. Just because it's an industry standard doesn't mean that you've got the supporting equipment to really drive it properly and to utilize why it's the mic that so many people choose. So that's kind of my rant. Well, that was SomeAudioGuy. Did you feel the shift from Juan
yeah, you
Bagnell to
became a
SomeAudioGuy?
minion. It's almost like Christian Bale when he goes into The Voice, you know.
Embodied him, right? Swear to me. It's a frustrating conversation because I have to have this conversation. Right. I didn't put enough Nixon into it. A good Batman voice, a good Christian Bale Batman voice has a lot of Richard Nixon. Swear to me. You got to get the jowls flapping. No, but it's why so many people don't like hanging out online to try and give advice on voiceover, because we end up having to have the same conversations over and over and over and over again. And if you come to me and you ask me what mic should I buy, I know you're not ready. I know you're not ready for this as a career. I know you're not ready for this as how you're going to achieve your performance. I know you're not ready for me to give you advice. It's I know that you don't know. I know what you don't know, and you're not going to get any special insight from me, because I'm going to give you the same advice that I've put out on countless blog posts and countless tweets in countless interviews, and I can point you to all of them, and I'm pretty sure most of the people aren't going to absorb that information, and they're not going to ingest it, and they're not going to make sense of it. They're just going to move on to the next person who will tell them, oh, well, buy an Audio-Technica, or you should buy a 416, or you should buy a Neumann, because they're the best. And that's what they want to hear. They want me to use my professional reputation to justify them buying something. And that's what I can't do, because that's how I built my professional reputation. So if we want to have a nuanced conversation about where you can go, well, the last 10 minutes of this podcast were chock full of interesting ways that you can set yourself up for more success if you're thinking long-term about this being a career. And hopefully you won't make me have to say it all over again.
Exactly. There's so many sources of information, even from just yourself, that if someone asks you that question, I can imagine you just going,
Well, and you can feel it too. You can I mean, like, because it's always, you know, like in like a workshop or in a class, and when you have a really good instructor or a really good teacher who knows his way around both the performance side of this and the technical side of this, you can just watch them deflate whenever they get that question. I mean, you put a brave face on it, and you try and answer it, and you try to stay respectful. The reason I didn't during this last rant is because, you know, it wasn't like someone was asking in earnest, like from the Twitter feed. It was just you, so I could be mean to you.
Oh yeah, exactly. Plus, you weren't you. You were some audio guy. You weren't.
Right,
You weren't
exactly. Totally. And that guy's a jerk. I'm a pretty cool dude. I'm pretty groovy. That other guy, he's an asshole.
Yeah.
But it's but it is it's sort of like people think that there's some sort of shortcut, or that there's some sort of insight that they're going to glean from us, which is going to abbreviate the process of working in voiceover. When you really read people's stories, when you really see how they got into this craft, you know, your career and performance needs to be measured in decades. It's not semesters in college and then you're a working performer. It's a constant process. It's a constant evolution. It's a constant self-critique, and you need to be of the temperament where you know that it's going to be an ongoing process, and that you're going to need to be open-minded enough to explore and to experiment and to fail a lot, before you can actually call yourself a working professional. All too often, you kind of get that there's this sort of entitlement on the internet. Like, if someone's following me on Twitter, that like they somehow deserve me giving them some special access to a career that other people shouldn't get to have. Or I'll go about and I'll say, well, you need to consider this, and you need to look at this, and you need to think about that, and then they'll still follow up with, but what should I do though? And again, that's not really for me to say. It's not really for me to give, because I'm not you, and that's not how I got into this business. And if you can't understand that, or if you can't respect that, then chances are you're probably not going to be successful in this industry. It's tough, because you want to foster a climate of discussion where you can make this better. I want to make this better for people. But me just going about and saying, well, you know, this is the mic that everyone should use, is the worst possible thing that anyone could do. Going around and saying, like, well, everyone should be using a Mac because Macs are better, is the worst possible thing that I could do to move this industry forward and to make my job easier. First and foremost is still, like, you know, I care more about me than I do about you. and like, if the advice I'm giving doesn't make my life easier, then I need to really examine what kind of advice it is that I'm giving people. And that's you know, that's why I sort of approach it from this sort of snarky disposition, but it's why I need to be blunt. One, because I just don't have the time to convince you that, you know, I'm trying to give you good advice. You can accept it or you can walk away. That's it. There's an amazing article from the guy who wrote A History of Violence, called you'll pardon, I'm about to drop an F-bomb for any of you who might be sensitive to swearing. But the title of the article, it's not me swearing, it's the title of the article is No, I Will Not Read Your Fucking Screenplay. And it's a very blunt examination of how relationships work in this industry, because, you know, I can try and convince you, and I can try and work with you, and I can try and hold your hand. It's going to take me a lot of time and a lot of effort that responsibly I should be spending on my casting, and responsibly I should be spending on my tech blogging. Those are the obligations that I actually have for feeding my family and for putting a roof over my head. And the relationships with other people that I've built, they depend on me to produce. So taking time out of that relationship to try and help you start your voiceover career is a little irresponsible for me. And so I can be an asshole up front and say, this is this is that. You can ignore it, or you can follow my advice. I don't care. Is way better than if I try and hold your hand and you don't like the answer at the end of weeks of coaching or weeks of hand-holding. Well, that was weeks of time where you still think I'm an asshole at the end of it. You know, I can be an asshole up front, you know, and we can just abbreviate all of that, because all of this information is out there. It's just whether or not you choose to accept it, and you choose to realize that we're telling you the truth. We're not holding stuff back from you. We're not trying to delay your entry into this craft. We are actually trying to tell you how to get into this industry. It's up to you to decide whether or not you want to believe us. But the people who know best are working in this industry. So, you know, they don't have the time to try and convince you that they're right. because they probably have an audition to go knock out. They probably have a session to go do. So you can listen to them or you can ignore them. And I know from personal experience and from watching other people try and work in this industry which one gets you farther and which one gets you better results. But I don't care if you ignore me on that. That's on you.
Exactly. I think it's a good approach to take because people need to respect where your time is kind of tied up with and where you kind of commit. Because everyone obviously has to think about themselves. It's not even in a selfish manner, and even if it is, it's not in a horrible way. I mean, I know you say you're being an asshole, but you're actually not when you're being upfront and being straight with people. If you're being straight with someone and
it's kind of why I always got frustrated with the American version, American Idol. Because Simon Cowell got so much shit for being the mean one, but when you really watched like the early auditions, Simon Cowell would always sit back there. He was stone-faced. He would watch the performance and he would say, like, I think you're crap, or this is not for you, or you should do anything else with your life. Whereas everyone else, like Paula would be laughing at people performing. That's like the meanest thing I could think of. Randy Jackson would be like, stinky nose, and whoa, this is so ridiculous, this is so horrible. But then they'd be a little nicer in their critique, like, oh, dog, I think you should maybe consider, it's okay, it's cool. Simon Cowell was being merciful. Like I thought he was actually the kindest element of that show because he would rarely openly mock someone who thought that singing was going to be their career. That maybe speaks a lot to the temperament of SomeAudioGuy. That like I find that somewhat inspirational. I don't know. It's that kind of got away from me. Now I don't know what point I'm trying to make. So I'm just going to stop right there before people think I'm the biggest jerk ever.
I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, so we were just talking about voice capture. And that's pretty much everything we should need to know. Is that about the audio gear and everything, or if you have a preference?
Well, I mean, we can always get more in depth. It's about understanding that you're going to have an ongoing relationship with performance, just as you're going to have an ongoing relationship with the technical side of it. And that's why I get so sort of upset on the actor's behalf that they have to tackle more of their own tech support, that they have to tackle more of their own engineering, because it's time out of developing and honing their talents as a performer. But you have to. That's just the way this industry works now. So, I mean, we can bemoan it and we can be upset about it, but at the end of the day, you still have to go and do it. I mean, it's still part of your job now. And so whenever I encounter someone who just doesn't want to know too much about all that technical stuff, like, well, surprise, you're an evolutionary dead end and you're not going to last as long as someone else who is going to take just a little bit of time. Not that they don't have to go and get a degree in physics to understand sound reinforcement, but that they're going to take
maybe
a little time
join the rest of the generation.
It's that they're gonna expend the effort, that it's valuable enough to them to consider what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. And that person is going to be so much better prepared when something goes wrong. All of this stuff loves to fail at the worst possible time. You can always count on a Mac or a PC dying when you exactly need it to not die.
Oh yeah, it's a myth. Macs do crash. I've seen it.
All the time.
Everyone's talking crap when they tell you that a Mac doesn't crash.
I mean, it's computers in general, and the fact that if you run it for any length of time, that it's slowly cooking itself, so it's gonna fail at some point. The hard drive is gonna crash at some point. The logic board is gonna short out at some point. It's inevitable. It's atrophy. But along that way, if you understand a little of what's happening in your magic box and in your magic mic and in your magic cabling, you sort of have at least some working knowledge of what that relationship is. You're so much better prepared for fixing it when it goes wrong. You're so much better prepared for diagnosing what's gone wrong so that someone else can fix it. So that it's not just some wide open, like, oh, it probably just needs a new hard drive, and you're fixing it through some sort of shotgun approach. That's kind of what kills me is it's becoming necessary, but too few people, I think, are really investing the small amount of time in that kind of knowledge and that kind of experience. And I think it would make their lives way easier in the long run, but they see a lot of people seem unwilling to try and have that conversation, and it impacts everything. It's why I'm not recording. I'm not doing this hangout on one of my super fancy mics. I'm not on a Blue Kiwi or my Rode Classic 2 or my AKG C414 because that would sound awful for this kind of conversation. It would not sound good. You'd hear my computer fan. You'd hear the people driving through this alley, which people have been. But this mic was designed for a certain temperament and a certain climate and a certain rejection. And you know what? It works a lot better for this sort of live radio style presentation that we're doing right now. You know, understanding why it is that we use these tools, that there isn't one mic for everything, is the first step in understanding that this is a wider world out there, and that there are things that you can really focus in on, and there are things that you can really achieve, and also just understanding that these will help you. That I have a certain characteristic to my voice that I want a mic to showcase. I know what mics in my collection do a good job of pulling some of the vibrato out of my mid-chest. I know what mics do a great job of focusing in on my sinuses. So what mic do I want to use? Do I want to use a mic that's going to make me sound geeky and nasally, or do I want a mic that's going to make me sound a little edgier and a little cooler? There are opportunities for both. You know, if I'm playing something really nerdy, well then yeah, maybe I do want to pick out the nasal mic. But often I want to be a cool guy, so I'm going to focus in on the mic that's going to do a good job with chest resonance and low mid frequency tone, because I don't have a bassy voice, but I have a little texture to the middle of my voice, and a ribbon is going to kill that. A tube microphone is going to soften it. A reference grade mic is going to pull out this raspy edge. It might be a little cold. It might not sound as warm as some of those other mics, but that's actually better for me, because then I'll stand out. Because all of you are using these warm mics with tube preamps, and everything's warm and dull and flat and muddy, and then my voice is going to cut through with a little buzz or a little rasp or a little edge, and it's going to be brighter and clearer, and it's going to be far more articulate. So guess what? I win. Boom, in your face. You got served. Straight street.
I like it. Well done.
Anytime. But short story, incredibly long. It's not about just like picking one chain and then sort of plateauing. It's not about, you know, someone told me that this mic was the best, so that's what I'm going to base my career off of. It's just understanding this stuff changes over time. The technology changes over time. The recording interfaces change over time. The software changes over time. Just as the style should change over time. The performance should change over time. Your script analysis should change over time. Your tools as an artist should change over time. And when you can merge that sense of the creation and the artistry of voiceover with some of these technical elements, your output skyrockets. Because you can give me an amazing performance, but you might not be able to capture it very well. Or you might be phenomenal at miking and editing, but you might not be able to act your way out of a paper bag. It's got to be both. It's on you now to make it both. You know, you can't get away from not being able to deliver on both fronts, because there are people coming up who will deliver on both fronts, and they're gonna crush you. They're gonna eat you for lunch.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I hear the excuse all the time of I don't have the tools. You know, I can't make it sound amazing. You know, I don't have the equipment, and it's not acceptable. You know, there's no need to be able to say it anymore. Just
it's not.
Apart from especially software and stuff. You know, there's a lot in the software side of things. There's a lot of free stuff that you can use to capture it fine, as long as you know what you're doing. You know, it's
well, and I mean, like, if we're talking software, like, that's one of the least important aspects in my opinion,
of course, exactly,
of this whole process. And yet you go online and you ask a question, you'll have knockdown, drag out fights over minutia. You know, if it's Pro Tools, if it's Adobe, if it's Sony, if it's
they all do the same thing.
If it's Reaper, if it's Twisted Wave, and you know what? By the time it's gotten to your software, that pie's been baked.
Yeah.
You know, you can't really edit your way out of a bad sound. I mean, you can EQ it, and you can noise reduction it, and you can plug in and filter it to death. But
if people need to do that to it when you do the VO, then they're not going to use you, because you need to be able to perform without all that crap.
Well, and let's say you were even just sending in audio remotely. I mean, if I get audio from someone that's brick wall limited and EQ'd out the wazoo, then I can't use that audio. I need to be able to edit. I need to be able to EQ it and fit it into a backing music track or sound effects or something else. If that's the mess that I get, then that's not an actor I can work with to do remotes. I mean, he's going to have to go to another studio where they're not going to butcher the audio before it gets sent to me. If that's really the only relationship you have with editing, then again, your entry into this craft, or your ability to sustain this as a career, is going to be far more difficult, as opposed to being able to get a clear, distinct sound out of a simple chain of equipment from the beginning, which then you can add to with this other stuff later on. If you focus on a little bit of that kind of recording technique first, it's going to serve you far better over the decades that you should be working in this industry.
Yeah. Everyone thinks about the wrong end of the process. They always think
it's totally backwards, and you can tell. It's every single time someone says, "Hey, I want to buy a nice mic." They don't know what it is. They know they want something different, and they don't know what it is. And it's very, very clear, and it's very difficult to correct that line of reasoning because it feels logical. I'm going to buy a nicer mic, and my recordings will be better. That feels like a very simple equation, and too often it's very much the opposite because of that thinking. You then have to then consider, well, you know, like I bought this really reference grade mic or this really nice mic. Now I have to spend so much more time treating and soundproofing and learning how to work it differently, and do I need to drive it with a dedicated preamp? Well, that's another stage of learning what is it that I need to do to get the best results out of this thing. And when you start working with mics like that, especially with spoken word, very minute changes in things like angle of attack can create profound differences in the sound of your recording. So, you know, all of that becomes sort of a very delicate art to learn. So why would you start, you know, jumping into the deep end and probably drowning yourself in all of this when you could have started with a much simpler entry into this, learned the basics, and then expanded your knowledge over time? But no one wants to hear it's a process over time. Everyone just wants to hear what's the shortest shortcut that I can use to become competitive because I need to start making money with this. And you're like, well, surprise, it's not going to happen that way. It's just not. It doesn't work that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, I fully believe in the trial and error approach, like you were saying as well. When you're teaching yourself, you know, beforehand, before you try and get out there, you need to learn how to do it. And like when I was first learning, for example, Pro Tools or whatever, some of the most productive sessions before I was jumping into it was when everything went wrong. Like you said, you learn from mistakes, you learn from when things go wrong. And although I hated it at the time,
but it leaves you so much better prepared for when you're actually game and when you're able. You know, doing that than you ever will sort of working with Fiverr. There was a question in the Q&A, what are your thoughts on using Fiverr to land voiceover gigs? And I think I've already said everything I need to say about that. So you missed it. It was a brilliant moment of,
there we go.
Of radio.
I'm back. What did I miss?
Yeah, it's Fiverr. I'm not really hip to Fiverr as any kind of, you know, tool for building a career or anything like that.
Yeah, no worries. I don't know if you caught where I was going, but like I say, I was talking about how all the mistakes were kind of the most productive sessions, and that although I hated it at the time, they were infuriating. But when I look back on them, they were some of the best sessions because then as soon as anything happened in an actual session, I knew exactly how to fix it straight away. So
no, totally.
That's pretty much where I was going with that.
And it's about experience, and like, people don't want to hear that, but you know, that kind of stuff builds character. So you know, it's gonna help you out. But I should probably get going. I mean, we've been talking for a little while here.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I was just looking at the time myself, thinking you probably have a lot to get on with. But it's been awesome speaking to you, and thank you ever so much for being on and speaking to the Sound Architects. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope everyone who's been joining us has enjoyed it. Apologies for the couple of technical hitches, but I think it's been really, really productive and an awesome session. Thank you very much.
I think we covered them well. I don't know that anyone noticed anything amiss. So yeah, we're pretty smooth. But thanks for having me. It's always fun to sort of express some of this, at least like face to face, as opposed to always trying to boil down our conversation into 140 characters or less. And so I really hope people are taking advantage of some of these resources, because there's a lot of really good information out there if you search for it, and you're willing and you're ready to sort of listen to it. I think people could get a lot further, a lot faster, and with a lot less trouble, if they were a bit more receptive to some of these things that you guys are doing.
Definitely, and I can highly recommend SomeAudioGuy on a personal level. I've checked out the blog; it's excellent. Definitely check it out, and definitely read it before asking Juan any questions like which mic do I use.
And my stress level thanks you for making that plea on my behalf.
Because beware, that is the Batman of the internet.
That's true. That's true. And I'll batarang your ass if you ask me what mic to buy.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Juan, and we'll let you be as busy as you are, and thanks again for your time.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Take care.
You too.
And thanks everyone else for tuning in.